In the Middle Ages, a civilization rose from the ashes of Rome in a world where kings put animals on trial for crimes, doctors diagnosed illness by tasting urine, and peasants could be executed for hunting a single rabbit. For 1,000 years, humans survived plague, warfare, famine, and constant peril, all while building the foundations of our modern world. This is what life was really like in medieval Europe. Before we start, if these help you sleep, a like or subscribe would be cool. Also drop where you're listening from and the time. I check the comments and it's crazy seeing people from like Australia and Norway on the same video. Alright, let's head back to medieval Europe. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously. Adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. The year is 476 CE. Your eyes flutter open in the cold pre-dawn darkness. You're lying on a rough straw mattress in a small wooden hut somewhere in what used to be the Western Roman Empire. Unlike your soft memory foam mattress with its cozy sheets, this bed is literally just a pile of straw covered with a scratchy woolen blanket that smells strongly of sheep and wood smoke. Every time you move, the straw crackles loudly, and something, hopefully just a beetle, scurries away beneath you. It's freezing cold. The fire died hours ago, and your breath forms little clouds in the air. The roof leaks in 3 places, and there's a small puddle forming in the corner. Through gaps in the wooden walls, you can hear the wind howling. A storm is coming. Your first thought isn't, I need coffee, or just 5 more minutes. It's, will I survive today? And that's not being dramatic. That's just Thursday in the early Middle Ages. So, congrats. You've woken up at the very beginning of what people would later call the Dark Ages, though honestly, that name isn't super fair. I mean, it was definitely dark in the mornings without electricity, but it wasn't all terrible, just mostly terrible. See, you've arrived at a pretty wild moment in history. Just a few years ago, the last Western Roman emperor, a kid with the unfortunately ironic name of Romulus Augustulus, was kicked off the throne by a Germanic warlord named Odoacer. The Western Roman Empire, which had ruled most of Europe for centuries, was gone. And let me tell you, when an empire collapses, it doesn't just mean a change in who collects taxes. It's like the entire operating system of society crashes. Picture this. For hundreds of years, Rome had built roads, aqueducts, public baths, and massive cities across Europe. They had professional soldiers, complex trade networks, a functioning currency, and laws that applied across thousands of miles. It wasn't perfect. It was especially if you were a slave or a woman or literally anyone except a rich Roman dude, but it worked. Then boom, gone. You know when your internet goes out and suddenly you can't do anything? Multiply that by like 1,000. The Romans leave and suddenly the roads, nobody's maintaining them anymore. They're overgrown or washed out. The cities, most people are bailing. The population of Rome itself went from maybe 1 million people at its height to about 20,000. That's like if modern New York City suddenly had fewer people than a small college town. Money basically doesn't exist anymore except as rare coins people hoard. Trade, good luck finding anything from more than a day's walk away. Laws, whatever the local warlord says they are today, you're now living in the ultimate fend for yourself era. But wait, you're thinking, weren't there kings and knights and castles? Not yet. We're in that awkward transition period where the old system is dead, but the new one isn't fully born. It's political chaos. Here's what's happening in your little corner of the former empire. A local big shot, let's call him Gunther, has gathered a few dozen warriors around him. They've got swords, spears, and a serious attitude problem. Gunther has declared himself the ruler of everything he can see from the hill he lives on. The problem is, there's another guy, let's call him Alaric, who's made the exact same claim one valley over. So your survival plan is basically to 1. Stay on Gunther's good side. 2. Hide whenever Alaric's boys show up. 3. Hope you don't starve between now and harvest. Speaking of which, you should probably get up. It's not like you have the luxury of hitting snooze. The roosters are already going crazy outside, and there's work to do if you want to eat. You drag yourself off the straw, your joints stiff from the cold. The floor is just packed earth and it's damp from yesterday's rain. Your feet find your wooden clogs, no comfy slippers for you, and you pull on the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Clothes are incredibly valuable in this era. You've got maybe 2 outfits total, and they're both made from rough wool that's been hand-spun, hand-woven and dyed using plants. Your tunic reaches your knees, and you wear simple trousers underneath. Everything itches constantly. Fashion isn't a priority when staying alive is a full-time job. "Morning," grunts your father, already stoking the fire. "Beans need picking, all of them, today." That's it. That's your alarm clock, your morning briefing, and your work assignment all rolled into one. Your morning routine isn't exactly Instagram-worthy. There's no shower, no bathroom, no toothbrush. You splash some water from a bucket on your face. It's ice cold and rinse out your mouth. You run your fingers through your hair to get the worst tangles out, and that's as good as it's going to get. Breakfast is a piece of hard bread dipped in watered-down ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. Even for kids, the water isn't safe to drink unless you boil it, and fuel is precious. Ale, with its low alcohol content, is safer because the fermentation process kills some of the nasty stuff. By the way, remember last week when we all freaked out about that spinach recall? In the early Middle Ages, food poisoning was just called Tuesday. As you step outside, the world is waking up. Your village is tiny, maybe 15 families total. The houses are clustered together, surrounded by fields where you grow beans, barley, and whatever else will survive in your local soil. There's a small wooden church that doubles as a meeting hall and triples as the only place anyone knows how to read. The village priest, Father Ethelred, is already up and making his way to morning prayers. He nods to you as he passes. He's one of the few connections your community has to the wider world, and the only person who knows anything about medicine beyond put a herb on it and pray. "Storm coming," he says, looking at the dark clouds. "Bad one. Tell your father." This isn't just small talk, it's vital information. A bad storm could flatten the bean crop, which means hunger this winter. It could make the river flood, which means disease. Every little piece of information helps you survive. You look around at your village. To modernize, it would look incredibly primitive. But here's the thing. This is actually human resilience at its finest. The complex Roman systems collapsed, and rather than just dying out, people adapted. They formed smaller communities. They focused on self-sufficiency. They built simpler but more sustainable local networks. Life got harder and more dangerous, but people figured out how to keep going. Like Edith over there, the widow who lost her husband to a fever last winter, she's developed a reputation as someone who knows which wild plants are safe to eat. When food stores run low in early spring, her knowledge might save the whole village, or Wulfric the smith, who can't make fancy Roman metalwork but has figured out how to repair basic tools using ore from a nearby hillside. Without his skills, farming becomes nearly impossible. Here's the wild thing about this era. It feels like you've gone backward in technology and comfort, but you're actually watching the birth of a new civilization. The collapse of Rome created a vacuum, and now 3 major influences are swirling around, gradually combining to create what we'll eventually call medieval culture. 1. Roman remnants, laws, language, and infrastructure that haven't completely disappeared. 2. Christian church, the only institution that survived the collapse mostly intact. 3. Germanic tribal customs from the various peoples who've moved in right now. These 3 streams are awkwardly trying to merge, like roommates with very different lifestyles figuring out how to share a bathroom. You're heading to the bean field when you hear shouting from the village centre. Your heart races. Shouting usually means one thing: trouble. You sprint back, your wooden clogs slipping in the mud. Everyone's gathering around a man on horseback. He's wearing a mail shirt that would have cost more than your entire village makes in a year, and he looks exhausted. "Bishop sends word," he announces, not bothering to dismount. "Alaric's men crossed the river yesterday, burning everything. They'll be here by midday." The village erupts in panicked voices. "Again?" Your father growls. "We paid tribute last harvest." "Wasn't enough, apparently," the messenger shrugs. "The bishop says to bring what you can carry to the old Roman villa. He's gathering men there." And just like that, your whole day, maybe your whole life, has changed. This isn't an unusual occurrence in the early Middle Ages. Violence is a constant threat, and you've developed an entire system for dealing with it. Within minutes, your mother is packing food and your father is burying the family's few valuables: a silver brooch from your grandmother, a small iron cooking pot, in a spot behind the house. If you survive, you'll dig them up later. If not, well, maybe someone will find a nice surprise in 1,000 years. "What about the beans?" you ask your father. He gives you a look that says everything. The beans don't matter if you're dead. As your family joins the stream of villagers heading toward the old Roman villa 2 miles away, you can't help but look back at your home. It's not much, that drafty wooden hut with the leaky roof, but it's everything you have. The Roman villa isn't really Roman anymore, and it's not really a villa. It's the crumbling remains of what was once a beautiful country estate. Most of the fancier parts were stripped long ago for building materials, but the thick stone walls still stand, creating a defensible position. Over the years, your community has maintained it specifically for moments like this. When you arrive, the scene is organized chaos. The bishop, a politically powerful church leader who owns much of the land in this region, has sent some of his armed retainers. They're directing people where to go, collecting the few weapons available, and organizing the able-bodied men. "You," a retainer points at your father, "ever use a spear?" Your father nods grimly. He was drafted to fight for a local lord 3 years ago in a similar crisis. "Good, over there." Just like that, your father is handed a farming tool that's been hastily converted into a weapon, a scythe blade strapped to a long pole. He gives your mother a quick embrace, ruffles your hair, and joins the line of defenders. Inside what was once the villa's great hall, families are huddled together. Children cry, elders pray. A few people with medical knowledge are preparing bandages from torn cloth. "They might bypass us," a woman whispers hopefully, "if the bishop's men are visible on the walls." "Alaric wants the church silver," another responds. "He won't bypass anything." Father Ethelred moves through the crowd, offering blessings and what comfort he can. You notice he's wearing a sword, not something you typically see on a priest. But in this world, everyone has to be ready to fight. "The church has stood for 400 years, he tells a frightened child. "God will not abandon it today." Hours pass in tense waiting. You help carry water, move supplies, do whatever you can to keep busy. The waiting is almost worse than the danger itself. Then you hear it. Horns in the distance. "They're coming from the north," a lookout shouts. Everyone moves at once. Women and children are ushered into the villa's old wine cellar, now reinforced as a last line of defence. Men take positions along the walls. Your last glimpse of daylight is your father standing shoulder to shoulder with farmers and craftsmen. None of them trained soldiers, all of them ready to die protecting their families. The cellar is dark, damp and packed with people. You can't see what's happening outside, but you can hear it. The shouting, the clash of weapons, screams of pain. Someone in the cellar is reciting prayers in Latin. Most people don't understand the words, but the rhythm is comforting. Hours pass. The sounds above change. Fewer clashes of weapons, more voices speaking a dialect you don't recognize, footsteps moving through the villa. Then the cellar door opens. Everyone holds their breath. It's Father Ethelred. His face is streaked with blood, but he's standing. "It's over," he says, his voice hoarse. "They've agreed to take the church silver and the harvest stores and leave." "Casualties?" someone asks. "6 of ours, many more of theirs." He makes the sign of the cross. God was with us today. As you emerge from the cellar, blinking in the late afternoon light, the reality of victory becomes clear. Yes, you've survived, but at a terrible cost. 6 men dead, the church stripped of its valuables, the food stores carefully saved for winter, gone. You scan the weary, blood-spattered defenders until you spot your father. He's helping carry one of the wounded, his improvised spear dark with dried blood. When he sees you and your mother, he manages a tired smile. This is what survival looks like in the early Middle Ages. Not heroic battles for glory, but desperate defense of the bare minimum needed to keep going. As your family walks back to the village, you pass fields trampled by horses, a storage shed burned to the ground, and a dead man you don't recognize lying in a ditch. One of Alaric's raiders. No one stops to bury him. "Will they come back?" you ask your father. "Not soon," he says. "They got what they wanted. By the time they're hungry again, the bishop will have sent more men." He pauses. "Or someone else will come instead." And that's the reality of your world. There's always someone else coming. The old Roman peace is gone. Now, survival means being constantly ready to run, hide, fight, or negotiate. Back at your home, thankfully unburned this time, your mother digs up the small cooking pot while your father retrieves the silver brooch from its hiding place. These small treasures, these bits of continuity, matter more than ever in a world where everything can be taken in an afternoon. As night falls, your family sits around the rekindled fire. No one talks much about what happened today. These events aren't unusual enough to warrant lengthy discussion. Instead, your father mends a broken tool while your mother uses precious salt to preserve some fish traded from a travelling merchant last week. The bishop's man said King Clovis in the north has converted to Christianity, your father mentions, breaking the silence. Says he controls all the old Frankish territories now. Your mother looks up from her work. "What does that mean for us?" "Might mean nothing," your father shrugs. "Might mean a new lord coming to collect taxes. Might mean the fighting stops for a while." This is how news travels in your world, fragments and rumours carried by merchants and church officials, spreading slowly from village to village. There are no newspapers, no radio broadcasts announcing major events. A king could die 100 miles away, and you might not hear about it for months. You chew on a piece of tough bread, wondering about this King Clovis. They say he was baptized with 3,000 of his warriors after winning a battle he'd prayed to win. A political conversion, maybe, but one that might reshape the future of what will eventually be called France. These big political changes happen in the background of your life. Your daily concerns remain the same. Will there be enough food? Will the raiders come back? Will disease strike the village this winter? As you lie back down on your straw mattress that night, the events of the day replaying in your mind, you understand something about this era that history books often miss: resilience. The Dark Ages weren't dark because people were stupid or because knowledge disappeared completely. They were dark because the massive systems that had made life predictable collapsed, and everyone had to figure out how to live in the uncertain aftermath. You pull your scratchy wool blanket up to your chin, listening to the wind outside. Tomorrow you'll go back to picking beans. You'll repair what was damaged. You'll rebury your treasures in a different spot, just in case. You'll adapt, because that's what humans in this era do better than anything else. And somewhere in this adaptation, in these small communities figuring out how to survive after empire, the foundations of medieval Europe are being laid, stone by stone, prayer by prayer, bean crop by bean crop. Your eyes grow heavy as the fire dies down to embers. In the morning, life goes on. It always does. Even in the Dark Ages. Especially in the Dark Ages. Morning comes too soon. The day after a raid is always the hardest. Muscles aching from tension, everyone moving slowly from exhaustion. But the beans still need picking, now more than ever, since half your winter stores were taken. You've been working for hours in the field when you hear riders approaching. Your stomach tightens with fear. Has Alaric changed his mind? Is this another raid? Everyone freezes, looking toward the road. 3 riders appear, wearing the bishop's colours. Collective relief washes over the field workers. These aren't raiders, these are the bishop's tax collectors. Wait, did I say relief? I meant a different kind of dread. The lead rider, a thin man with a permanent squint, unrolls a parchment. By order of Bishop Severinus, 1/3 of all harvest is now due immediately to compensate for defence provided against northern aggression. Your father straightens his back, soil still caked under his fingernails. 1/3? We already lost half to the raiders. The tax collector's face remains impassive. The bishop's men bled for your protection yesterday. 6 men died. The price is 1/3. And there it is, the emerging medieval system in action. You're caught between 2 powerful forces, the raiders who take what they want through violence and the protectors who take what they want through taxation. The difference? The bishop at least leaves you enough to survive. Usually, "We'll starve this winter," someone mutters, just loud enough to be heard. The tax collector sighs, as if dealing with stubborn children. The bishop has authorised emergency grain distribution in February if winter proves harsh. He looks around at your meagre fields. "I suggest you hunt to supplement your stores." Everyone exchanges glances. Hunting in the old forest is technically forbidden to peasants. The wild game belongs to the local nobility. Reading your thoughts, the tax collector adds, "The bishop has granted temporary hunting rights in the North Woods, small game only, until Michaelmas." He rolls up his parchment. "Consider it God's mercy." As the collectors move through the village, supervising as precious food is loaded onto their carts, you get a glimpse of how the world is changing around you. 30 years ago, your grandfather told you each village operated mostly on its own, but power is consolidating. The church, local nobles, and distant kings are creating overlapping systems of control. "It's the new way," your father says that night as your family eats a dinner made smaller by the day's collection. "The world's sorting itself out. Bishop protects us from raiders. We feed the bishop. Bishop pledges loyalty to the king. King keeps bigger enemies at bay." "Seems like we do all the feeding and they do all the enjoying," your mother remarks, breaking apart a small loaf of bread to make it seem like more. Your father shrugs. Better than what happened to the next valley over. No protection, no organization. Raiders took everything. Half the people dead, other half fled. This conversation is happening in thousands of households across what used to be the Western Roman Empire. People are realizing that survival requires new systems, networks of obligation, protection, and service. What you're witnessing, though you wouldn't use these terms, is the early development of feudalism. 2 weeks later, you've settled back into the rhythm of village life when something truly unusual happens. A royal messenger arrives. This isn't some local bishop's errand boy. This is a direct representative of King Clovis himself, the powerful Frankish ruler who's been conquering territory and converting to Christianity. His arrival is like a celebrity showing up in your small town. Everyone drops what they're doing to gather around. The king commands all able men between 16 and 40 to present themselves to his captains at the old Roman crossroads in 7 days' time, the messenger announces. The king marches against the Visigoths in the south. Those who serve will be rewarded with silver and land. A war expedition. This isn't a local skirmish or defensive action. This is a real military campaign, the kind that could redraw the maps if people used maps, which mostly they don't. That night, your village buzzes with conversation. Around your family's fire, the debate gets heated. "I'm going," your father announces. Your mother's face goes pale. "You're a farmer, not a soldier." "King's offering silver and land," your father responds, poking at the fire. "When has anyone ever offered us land?" "Land does no good to a dead man." Your father puts his hand on yours. "I'm going so someday you might have something more than beans and a leaky roof to inherit." 3 days later, he leaves with 7 other men from your village. You watch them walk down the road carrying spears and small packs of provisions until they disappear around the bend. You won't know if your father is alive or dead until he either returns or doesn't. This is communication in the early Middle Ages. No phone calls, no letters, just waiting. Months pass. Winter arrives, harsh and unforgiving. The North Woods, where you've been hunting small game, become blanketed in snow too deep to traverse. Food stores dwindle faster than expected. By January, meals are reduced to a thin gruel once a day. Your mother trades your grandmother's silver brooch, the family's most valuable possession, for a sack of grain from a passing merchant. It's highway robbery prices, but it keeps you alive. In February, as promised, the bishop distributes emergency grain. It's not much, barely enough to make bread twice a week, but combined with carefully rationed stores, it means you probably won't starve before spring. This is life in the early Middle Ages, constantly on the edge of disaster, saved by thin margins. You're gathering firewood in the early spring when you hear a shout from the village. You drop your bundle and run, your heart racing. Good news has been so rare this winter that any disruption feels like potential hope. Men are returning from the king's expedition. Not all of them. Only 4 of the 8 who left. But among the returning figures, you recognize your father's walk. He's thinner, and he's limping badly, but he's alive. You crash into him with a hug that nearly knocks him over. That night, around a fire built higher than your family has allowed in months, your father tells his story. The march south, the battle against the Visigoths, King Clovis's famous victory at Vouillé that smashed Visigothic power and expanded Frankish control all the way to the Pyrenees Mountains. "It was like nothing I've ever seen," he says, his eyes distant. Thousands of men, the king's guards in matching cloaks with gold brooches, bishops blessing the troops, supply wagons that stretched for miles. He pulls out a small pouch and empties it on the table. Several silver coins, more money than your family has ever had at once, and a piece of parchment marked with the king's seal. "What is it?" your mother asks, picking up the parchment carefully, unable to read it. Land grant, your father says, a hint of pride breaking through his exhaustion. 20 acres, a half-day's walk from here, includes part of the old Roman road. Your mother's eyes widen. Our land, not the bishop's, ours to farm. We pay a tenth to the king directly, not through the bishop. He taps the parchment. This says we're under royal protection now. And just like that, your family's status has fundamentally changed. You're still not wealthy or powerful, but you've moved up in the world. You have land directly from the king. You have royal protection. You have a place in the emerging feudal order. Over the next 10 years, you watch the world transform. King Clovis dies, but his sons continue expanding Frankish power. The church grows more organized, building stone churches to replace wooden ones. Trade slowly increases as stability improves. Roads that had fallen into disrepair see traffic again. Your family prospers, relatively speaking. The land by the Roman road allows you to sell food to travellers. Your father uses the silver from the war to buy proper iron tools. You even add a small sleeping loft to your house, giving you your own space for the first time in your life. Now a young adult, you understand things you didn't as a child. The big picture is becoming clearer. Europe is reorganizing itself. The chaos that followed Rome's fall is giving way to new structures of power and control. Kings, nobles, bishops, all bound together by oaths of loyalty and mutual obligation. Life is still incredibly hard by modern standards. Disease sweeps through regularly. You lost 2 younger siblings to fever despite the prayers and herbs. Raids still happen occasionally, though less frequently as the Frankish kings consolidate power. But compared to the dark days after Rome's collapse, there's noticeably more order and security. One autumn day, nearly 20 years after that first raid that sent you hiding in the Roman villa cellar, you're supervising the harvest on your family's land when you see an unusual procession on the road. Dozens of people walking together, carrying bundles, leading a few thin livestock. You approach the road, curious. The travellers look exhausted, their clothes ragged. "Where are you coming from?" you call to a man near the edge of the group. "East," he says simply, not slowing his pace. "What's happened?" He glances back at you, his expression haunted. Avars, hundreds of them, burning everything. You've heard of the Avars, a nomadic people from the distant east, fierce warriors on horseback. Rumours of their raids have reached you, but they've always seemed a remote threat. "How far?" you ask, feeling a chill despite the autumn sun. "They hit our village 6 days ago, moving west." The man shifts his pack and continues walking. You hurry back to your workers. Finish quickly, get everything inside the walls. This is a key difference from your childhood. Your family's prosperity has allowed you to join with 3 neighbouring families to build a small walled compound around your cluster of houses. Nothing fancy, just a wooden palisade and a gate, but better than the completely exposed village of your youth. That night, your father, now greying and slower but still strong, meets with the other family heads. "If it's really the Avars, walls won't help much," says Godric, a former soldier who settled here 5 years ago. "They have tactics the local raiders don't. We should send word to the King's Reeve," your father suggests, referring to the royal official who oversees this region. Wulfstan, the oldest of the group, shakes his head. "King's dealing with trouble from his brothers in the north. That's what the merchant said last week. We're on our own." This is still a world where distant authority means little in a crisis. Despite all the changes, when danger comes, you still rely on your immediate community. The next day, you're helping reinforce the gate when a rider appears on the road, not from the east, but from the west. He's wearing the bishop's colours. Avars raiding the Eastern Territories, he announces without preamble. The bishop commands all able men to the old Roman villa for defence. Bring food for 2 weeks. Godric steps forward. How many Avars? Reports say 200, maybe more, mounted archers mostly. A grim silence falls over your compound. 200 mounted warriors is an overwhelming force. When? Your father asks. Now, the messenger says. They hit Aldrich's steading yesterday. Everyone dead. Aldrich's place is less than a day's ride away. What follows is a scene you've experienced before, but now you're an adult participating in the decisions rather than a child being protected. The community divides supplies, decides what can be carried and what must be hidden, determines who will fight and who will shelter with the children and elderly. You find yourself appointed to lead a group of younger men as a scouting party. Your father, now too old for the main fighting force but still respected for his experience, will coordinate defence at the compound for those too sick or frail to travel to the villa. As you prepare to leave with your small band of scouts, your father pulls you aside. "Remember when you were a boy, hiding in the cellar during the raid?" he asks. You nod. It's still vivid in your memory. "Now you're the one others will look to," he says, adjusting the leather armour you've hastily put on, a luxury your family couldn't have afforded in your childhood. Be smart. Don't be a hero. Information saves more lives than swords. You embrace him, suddenly aware that this might be goodbye. The thought sits like a stone in your stomach as you lead your group of 5 men toward the eastern road. Your mission is straightforward. Get eyes on the Avar force, gauge their numbers and direction, and get word back without being spotted. You're not fighters, you're messengers, intelligence gatherers, the early warning system. The day passes tensely as you move through forests parallel to the main road, stopping occasionally to listen and observe. No sign of the raiders yet, but you find abandoned carts on the road, livestock killed but not taken, small holdings burned. At dusk, you make camp in a hidden hollow, not risking a fire despite the autumn chill. You share dried meat and hard bread, speaking little. Every man there knows the stakes. Just before midnight, Egbert, the youngest of your group, shakes you awake from a light sleep. "Riders," he whispers, pointing east. You crawl to the edge of the hollow and peer over. In the moonlight, you can make out figures moving on the road, horsemen riding in tight formation, moving west with purpose. "How many?" you whisper. "I counted 60 passing so far," Egbert responds. "Still coming." You watch in silence as the column of riders continues. These aren't the disorganized raiders of your childhood. These are disciplined warriors, moving quietly, maintaining formation even at night. When they've passed, you gather your men. "Lodric, Egbert, get back to the compound and the villa. Warn them. At least 100 riders, maybe more still coming, moving fast on the main road." "What about you?" Lodric asks. "The rest of us will keep tracking, see if there are more behind or if they split off." You hand him your water skin as a small extra supply. "Go, now." As Lodric and Egbert disappear into the night, heading west through the forest, you consider what you've seen. The Avars are moving faster than anyone expected. They'll reach the populated areas by midday tomorrow, before most people have even evacuated to the villa. This is the constant reality of life in this era. Plans fall apart, information comes too late, and survival often depends on quick decisions with incomplete knowledge. You decide to move your remaining group closer to the road, finding a vantage point from a small rise. From there, you can see the tail end of the Avar column passing, at least 150 riders in total, with a smaller group of pack horses carrying supplies. We should head back, Wulfric, a stocky farmer with a talent for tracking, suggests once the last rider has passed. Warning's been sent. You're about to agree when you notice movement from the north, another smaller group of riders joining the main column from a side path. They're coming from the direction of your compound. Your blood runs cold. That northern path leads directly to your home, where your father and the others who couldn't travel to the villa are waiting, thinking they have another day to prepare. They've split their forces, you realise aloud. The main group on the road is a diversion. Without discussion, all three of you know what must be done. You abandon stealth for speed, running through the forest toward home, using every shortcut and game trail you know. Dawn is breaking as you reach the edge of the forest near your compound. From the tree line, you can see it's already too late. Smoke rises from within the walls. The gate lies splintered on the ground. There's no movement, no sound except the crackling of flames. You've survived your first 25 years in the early Middle Ages through caution and community, but now those you love are inside those burning walls. What happens next will test everything you've learned about survival in this harsh world. You stand frozen at the forest's edge, staring at the burning compound. Everything in you screams to rush forward, to search for survivors, to find your father. But the small cold voice of survival, the one that's kept you alive for 25 years in this unforgiving world, holds you back. Wait, Wulfric whispers, gripping your arm. They might still be there. He's right. Rushing in could mean walking straight into Avar warriors. You force yourself to watch, to listen, to think. After what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes, you see movement. Riders emerging from behind the compound, maybe 10 of them, carrying bundles. They pause briefly, looking back at their handiwork, then ride north at a casual pace. They're not rushing. They don't expect pursuit. Once they're out of sight, you and your two companions sprint across the open field to the compound. The gate is destroyed and several buildings are engulfed in flames. The smell hits you first, smoke, burning thatch and something worse. Father, you call, pushing deeper into the compound, eyes stinging from the smoke. Anyone. A weak cough answers from the direction of the storage shed. You rush over to find Edith, the old woman who knows about medicinal plants, half buried under a fallen beam. Her leg is badly burned, but she's alive. They came at dawn, she manages, as you lift the beam off her. No warning. My father, you ask, already dreading the answer. Her eyes fill with tears. Tried to hold the gate, gave the others time to hide in the root cellar. You leave Wulfric to tend to Edith and race to the root cellar entrance behind the main house. The door is intact but barred from the inside, a good sign. It's me, you shout, pounding on the door. They're gone. The bar slides back and faces peer up from the darkness. 6 people, mostly the elderly and 2 young children whose parents are at the villa, but not your father. You find him by the broken gate, along with 3 other men. They died as they lived, farmers turned reluctant warriors defending their small corner of a chaotic world. You close your father's eyes, noting with grim pride that 3 Avar warriors lie dead nearby. The defenders sold their lives dearly. There's no time for proper mourning. The Avar's main force is heading for the villa, where most of your community is gathered. If they don't know about the split force that hit your compound, they'll be unprepared. We need to warn them, you tell Wulfric, who nods grimly. What follows is a desperate race against time. You leave the wounded with what supplies you can spare and set off with your remaining men, cutting across country toward the villa. Every minute counts. Every decision could mean life or death for dozens. Your small group reaches the villa by midday, exhausted but driven by urgency. The scene is one of frantic preparation. Men sharpening weapons, women gathering stones to drop from the walls, children carrying water. You find the bishop's captain, a grey-haired veteran named Gerald, directing the defences. Avars hit our compound at dawn, you report between gasping breaths. They've split their forces. Main group on the road is a diversion. Gerald's expression darkens. How many hit your place? About 10. But there was another group joining the main force from the north. They're surrounding, not just coming from the east. The captain immediately starts shouting new orders, redirecting men to cover the northern approaches. Scouts are sent out in all directions. The entire defense plan shifts based on your information. Your father? Gerald asks quietly as men rush to their new positions. You just shake your head. He clasps your shoulder briefly, the most sympathy you can expect in this moment of crisis. He was a good man, fought beside me for King Clovis. Then, in the practical way of people accustomed to death, can you still handle a bow? By late afternoon, the villa is as ready as it can be. Every approach is watched. Archers are positioned on the remaining upper walls. Caltrops, vicious metal spikes, have been scattered along the likely cavalry approaches. Women and children are secured in the deepest chambers. You're stationed on the northwest corner with 5 other archers when the first riders appear on the eastern road. They approach slowly, seemingly unconcerned about resistance. "They don't know we're warned," whispers the man beside you. "They think the surprise attack from the north will hit first." He's right. The Avars on the road are moving with the confidence of those who believe their plan is working perfectly. But where is the northern group? Your question is answered moments later when a horn sounds from the southern woods. 3 short blasts, the signal that enemies are approaching from an unexpected direction. "They're coming from everywhere," someone mutters, and they are. The Avars have completely surrounded the villa, approaching from all sides at once. The defenders rush to redistribute, trying to cover too many points with too few men. What follows is chaos. Arrows flying, men shouting, the thunder of hooves as Avar riders probe the defences, looking for weak points. Unlike the raiders of your childhood, these warriors are disciplined, coordinated. They don't waste lives on frontal assaults against prepared positions. They're patient, waiting for a mistake. The mistake comes as dusk approaches. Someone, you never learn who, left a small postern gate inadequately barred. Avar warriors discover it, and suddenly they're inside the walls, behind the main defences. They're in. The cry goes up, sending a wave of panic through the defenders. Gerald rallies men to contain the breach, but it's too late. More Avars pour through the opening, and the defence collapses into desperate individual battles. "Fall back to the inner rooms," Gerald shouts as the organised resistance crumbles. You find yourself retreating with a group of defenders fighting a running battle through the villa's corridors. An Avar arrow grazes your arm, but you keep moving, keep fighting. There's no choice. The final stand happens in what was once the villa's atrium, now a strengthened defensive position. 30 men form a ring around the entrance to the chambers where the women and children are hiding. The Avars could easily overwhelm you with numbers, but something strange happens. The attacks slow, then stop. An eerie silence falls. "What are they doing?" someone whispers. The answer comes in the form of smoke, thick, choking smoke pouring into the room. "They're not going to fight you. They're going to smoke you out or let you burn." "We need to break out," Gerald says, coughing, "or we all die here." It's a suicide mission, but staying means certain death. 20 men volunteer for the charge, you among them. The plan is simple. Create enough chaos to allow the women and children to escape out the back while the Avars are occupied with the fighting. Gerald looks each volunteer in the eye. No speeches, no grand words, just a nod of acknowledgement between men who know they're probably about to die. "Now," he shouts, and you burst from the smoke-filled room into the courtyard. The Avars are startled by the sudden attack, giving you a momentary advantage. You cut down one warrior before he can raise his weapon, then find yourself face to face with another. His curved sword misses your neck by inches. You drive your knife into his thigh, and he falls. All around you is confusion, screaming, the clash of weapons, bodies falling. Through the chaos, you see women and children fleeing from the back of the villa, making for the woods. The plan is working. An Avar rider charges toward you. You dive aside, feeling the wind of his passage, then scramble to your feet. Something hits you from behind. An arrow, a glancing blow from a weapon. You're not sure. Pain explodes across your back, and the world goes dark. You wake to silence and the copper taste of blood in your mouth. Night has fallen. The villa is burning, casting an orange glow over bodies scattered across the courtyard. Both defenders and Avars lie dead or dying. You try to move and nearly pass out from pain. Your back is on fire, your left arm numb, but you're alive. As your eyes adjust, you realize you're not alone among the living. Shapes are moving through the courtyard, Avars stripping the dead of anything valuable. You lie still, playing dead, hardly daring to breathe as a warrior passes within feet of you. Hours pass. The looters eventually leave, and the fires burn low. You manage to drag yourself to the edge of the woods, each movement an agony. There, mercifully, unconsciousness claims you again. He's alive over here. The voice cuts through darkness. Hands turn you over, sending fresh waves of pain through your body. It's him, the scout who warned us. You open your eyes to see a familiar face. Egbert, the young man you sent to warn the villa. He looks different, a deep cut across his cheek, eyes that have seen too much. The others, you managed to ask? Some got away. Gerald didn't make it. Most of the children survived. Egbert helps you drink from a water skin. It's been 3 days. We thought you were dead with the rest. 3 days. You've been unconscious in the woods for 3 days. By all rights, you should be dead from wounds, exposure, or animals. Yet here you are, stubbornly alive. The next weeks pass in a blur of pain and grief. The Avars moved on after destroying the villa, apparently satisfied with the destruction they caused. Survivors gather at a nearby monastery that was spared the attack. Wounds are treated. The dead are buried. Plans are made. Your injuries are severe. A deep gash across your back, a broken collarbone, burns on your legs. The monastery's infirmarian treats you with poultices and prayers, telling you it's a miracle you survived. Slowly, painfully, you heal. Not completely. Your left arm will never work quite right again, and the scars across your back pull tight with every movement, but you're alive when so many aren't. 2 months after the attack, you return to what's left of your family's compound. The burnt buildings have been partially reclaimed by nature, weeds growing through the charred timbers. You find your father's grave marked with a simple wooden cross next to your mother's older one. You stand there for a long time, remembering. Your father was born in the chaos after Rome's fall. He lived to see the rise of the Frankish kingdom, fought for King Clovis, earned land through service. He built something from nothing, carved stability from chaos, and now it's gone. But not everything is gone. The land remains, 20 acres granted by royal charter. The knowledge your father passed to you remains, and most importantly, you remain. That night, sleeping rough in the ruins of your childhood home, you make a decision. You'll rebuild, not just a house, but a life. You survived for a reason. The next decade passes with dizzying speed. You rebuild the compound, this time with thicker walls and better defences. You marry a woman from a neighbouring village whose family was also devastated by the Avar raids. Children come. 2 sons and a daughter who survive infancy, 2 more buried as babies. The world around you continues to evolve. The Frankish kingdom expands under a succession of rulers. The church grows more powerful, more organized. New technologies spread slowly. Improved plows that cut deeper into the soil, better harnesses for horses that increase their pulling power, water mills that grind grain more efficiently. You're approaching 40, old by the standards of your time, when word comes of a new king. Charles, son of Pepin, has taken the Frankish throne. They say he's different from those who came before, more ambitious, more visionary. They call him Carolus Magnus, Charles the Great, or simply Charlemagne. At first, this seems like distant news that won't affect your daily life. Kings come and go. Your concerns remain local. Good harvests, safety from raiders, healthy children. But as Charlemagne's reign continues, you begin to notice changes. Roads are repaired, trade increases, royal officials appear more regularly, enforcing laws, collecting taxes, but also providing real protection. There's a sense of something larger taking shape. The king has conquered the Lombards in Italy, reports a travelling merchant who stops at your compound, now a well-established waypoint on the old Roman road. They say the Pope himself placed a crown on Charlemagne's head, naming him protector of the church. Your oldest son, now 16, listens to these stories with shining eyes. Will there be more campaigns? Could I join the king's army? You recognize the look, the same one you probably had when hearing about King Clovis's victories as a boy, the allure of something bigger than your small corner of the world. The king's not just fighting, the merchant continues, unpacking fine cloth that would have been unavailable just years ago. He's building new churches, monasteries, schools. They say he's gathering scholars from across Christendom. Schools, you ask, surprised. Education has been the province of monasteries for as long as you can remember, focused on producing priests and monks. The king believes in learning, says a proper Christian kingdom needs educated men, not just good warriors. The merchant holds up a small metal pin, a luxury item you couldn't have afforded in your youth. They say he's even learning to read himself, though he started too late to master it fully. This detail strikes you, a king who values knowledge enough to struggle with his letters despite his power. Something is changing in the world. That evening, you find your son practicing swordplay with a wooden stick behind the barn. I want to join the king's service, he says, when he notices you watching, like grandfather did with King Clovis. You look at him, strong, healthy, eager for a world bigger than bean fields and palisade walls. You think of your father, who took a similar risk and won land and status that changed your family's fortunes. You think of how quickly life can be destroyed, as it was during the Avar raid. We'll speak to the bishop's man next time he comes through, you find yourself saying. See if there's a proper place for you. Your son's face lights up, but you raise a cautioning hand. Not as some glory-seeking warrior, as someone useful. The merchant says the king needs builders, administrators, people who can read and figure. You gesture to the prospering compound around you. You've learned how to manage land, deal fairly with travellers, keep accounts in your head. Those skills matter more than swinging a sword. 6 months later, your son leaves with a church official heading to Aachen, Charlemagne's capital. He's to be apprenticed to a royal administrator, a position that would have been unimaginable in your youth when the world was fragmented into tiny, isolated communities just struggling to survive. As you watch him ride away, dressed in better clothes than you ever owned as a young man, you reflect on how much has changed in your lifetime. The desperate chaos of the post-Roman world has given way to something more organized, more connected. There are still raiders, still disease, still hungry winters, but there's also more hope. more possibility. That night, your wife finds you sitting by the fire, unusually quiet. "He'll be all right," she says, misreading your mood as worry for your son. "I know," you reply. "He's entering a better world than the one I grew up in, and that's the truth of it." Without realizing it, you've lived through a turning point in history, from the deepest part of the Dark Ages to the beginning of what scholars will later call the Carolingian Renaissance, the first of several medieval periods of cultural and intellectual revival. Your personal story, from frightened child hiding from raiders to established landholder sending a son to the king's service, mirrors the larger transformation of Europe: stability from chaos, order from disorder, the painful, halting birth of medieval civilization from the ashes of Rome. Later that night, as you drift towards sleep, you think about all the people who didn't survive to see this change. Your parents, friends lost to raids or disease, entire communities wiped out. Survival wasn't just about individual strength or luck. It was about adaptability, community, the slow building of new systems to replace what was lost. Outside, a spring rain patters gently on the roof, a roof that doesn't leak, in a house with solid walls, in a compound protected by a community that looks out for its own. Not luxury by any modern standard, but security and comfort that would have seemed impossible in your childhood. The Middle Ages are far from over. The world will continue to change, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But tonight, in this moment of relative peace, you appreciate how far things have come. And you wonder how much further they might go. The years pass like water flowing downstream, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving forward. Your hair has turned grey, your once strong back now stoops slightly, and the wound from the Avar raid aches when rain is coming. But you've survived. More than survived. You've built something lasting. Your compound has grown into a proper settlement. Where once stood 4 families behind a wooden palisade, now 20 households cluster around a small stone church. The old Roman road that runs past your land has become a regular trade route, bringing merchants, travellers, and news from distant places. When travellers ask the name of this place, people simply say Harold's Cross, after the wooden cross you placed on your father's grave decades ago. Somehow, without you really noticing, you've become the founder of a village. Your son, the one who left to serve in Charlemagne's administration, returns for visits every few years. He's a different man now, confident, educated, wearing fine clothes and a sword he knows how to use. Through him, you hear about the wider world that most villagers only glimpse in fragments. The emperor has established schools throughout the realm, he tells you during one visit, using Charlemagne's imperial title that still sounds strange to your ears. Not just for monks and priests, but for administrators, engineers, even the children of common nobles. You can hardly imagine it, a world where learning extends beyond monastery walls, where books are being copied and preserved, where knowledge is valued for its own sake. It's so far from the desperate survival of your childhood that it might as well be a different world. The palace at Aachen has heated floors, your son continues, describing Charlemagne's capital. Like the old Romans had, pipes carrying hot water beneath stone tiles. Your grandchildren listen wide-eyed to these tales, unable to comprehend the luxury of warm floors when they've never known anything but packed earth or rough wooden planks beneath their feet. But despite these wonders, all is not perfect in Charlemagne's empire. Even as civilization rebuilds, new threats emerge. There's trouble on the northern coasts, your son tells you in a quieter moment, away from the children's ears. Ships from the north, raiders unlike any we've seen before. Worse than the Avars, you ask, the old scar on your back seeming to throb at the memory? Different. They come from the sea, strike without warning, and vanish before our forces can respond. They target monasteries especially, all that gold and silver in the churches. He sighs. The Emperor has ordered coastal defences built, but our borders are vast. These northern raiders are still a distant concern for your inland community, but over the next few years the stories grow more frequent, more alarming. They call themselves Northmen or Vikings. Their longships can navigate rivers, allowing them to strike deep inland. No coast in Charlemagne's empire seems safe. Then, in your 68th year, an age few people in your time reach, word comes that the great emperor has died. Charlemagne, who seemed as permanent as the mountains, is gone. What happens now? Asks your daughter, who manages much of the village's affairs since your health began to decline. The answer comes from your educated son. His son Louis inherits everything. They're calling him Louis the Pious. He's already been crowned co-emperor. The transition seems smooth, but you've lived long enough to know that change brings uncertainty, and you're right to worry. Over the next decade, you watch from your small corner of the world as the mighty Carolingian Empire begins to fray at the edges. Emperor Louis lacks his father's forceful personality and strategic mind. His sons fight among themselves for power. The efficient administration Charlemagne built starts to buckle under personal rivalries and local interests. Meanwhile, the Viking raids intensify. No longer content with quick strikes against undefended monasteries, they now lead larger forces, sometimes wintering in territories they've seized, establishing bases for further conquest. Paris was attacked, your son reports during a visit, his face grim. The Vikings sailed up the Seine with 100 ships. The people had to pay thousands of pounds of silver to make them leave. It's almost incomprehensible. Paris, one of the greatest cities in the empire, forced to pay off raiders rather than defeat them. Something fundamental is shifting in the world order. When Louis the Pious dies in 840, the empire plunges into civil war. His three sons, Lothair, Louis the German and Charles the Bald, fight for control, weakening central authority and draining resources that should be defending against external threats. You're in your mid-70s now, an extraordinary age for your era. Most of your contemporaries are long dead. You spend your days sitting in the sunshine outside your home, still the largest in the village, though now run by your youngest son and his wife, watching the world continue to change. One autumn day, as you doze in your chair, a commotion wakes you. Villagers are gathering, pointing at something on the road. You squint your aging eyes and make out a group of travellers approaching. Not the usual merchants or pilgrims, but a procession of monks carrying chests and religious objects. "What's happening?" you ask your granddaughter, who helps you stand. "Monks from St. Martin's," she explains, referring to a wealthy monastery some 50 miles north. "They say Vikings have established a camp on the river. They're bringing their relics south for safety. The monks are given shelter in your village's small church." That evening, their leader, a thin, scholarly man named Brother Alcuin, shares his story with the village elders, you among them, despite your age. "They came at dawn," he says, his hands still trembling slightly. 40 ships at least. We'd heard the warnings but thought we had time to evacuate our treasures." His eyes unfocus, seeing horrors you can only imagine. "They moved so quickly. Most of our brothers didn't escape." "How far south have they come?" asks your son-in-law, now the village's unofficial leader. They've established a camp at the river bend near Andel. They're demanding tribute from all surrounding communities. Brother Alcuin looks down at his hands. Those who don't pay are made examples of. A heavy silence falls over the gathering. Your village isn't directly on the river, but it's close enough to be within reach of raiders. The king's forces? Someone asks hopefully. Brother Alcuin gives a bitter laugh. Which king? Charles and Louis still fight over borders while the Northmen take what they please. You listen to the frightened discussions, the hasty plans for defence or evacuation if necessary. It reminds you of similar conversations during the Avar threat decades ago, but you're too old now to fight, too frail to flee. That night, unable to sleep, you sit by your window watching the stars. You've lived through the fall of one world and the painful birth of another. You've seen the chaos after Rome's collapse give way to Charlemagne's ordered empire, and now you're witnessing that order begin to fragment again. But something is different this time. The descent isn't as complete. The foundations laid during Charlemagne's reign, the administrative systems, the network of monasteries preserving knowledge, the sense of a unified Christian world, those remain even as political unity crumbles. The next morning brings unexpected news. A royal official, not just a messenger, but a proper Mrs. Dominicus, one of the Lord's envoys established by Charlemagne to represent imperial authority, arrives in your village. By order of King Charles, he announces to the assembled villagers, all communities within a day's ride of the river must contribute men and materials for a defence force against the northern invaders. There are grumbles. Your village, like most, can ill afford to lose able-bodied men during harvest season, but the alternative is worse. Additionally, the official continues, consulting a document, local defence will be organised under Count Adalbert, who has been granted emergency powers by the king. Count Adalbert. You know the name, a local noble whose family rose to prominence under Charlemagne, given a county to administer. Under normal circumstances, his authority is balanced by royal officials and church powers, but these aren't normal circumstances. The Count will arrive within the week to assess your contribution and organise your defences, the official concludes, before riding on to the next settlement. After he leaves, your daughter comes to sit beside you, worry etched on her face. What does this mean? She asks. Is this good or bad? You consider the question carefully. You've seen enough of history to recognise patterns. Both, you finally answer. The king is too weak to defend us directly, so he's delegating power to someone closer, this count. It means we'll have better protection against the Vikings. You pause. It also means the count will have more control over our lives than before. Will it work against these Northmen? You think of the Avars, of how local defences ultimately failed against a determined mobile enemy, but you also remember how communities banded together, how knowledge and warning saved many lives. Not perfectly, you admit. Some places will fall, but others will hold, and knowledge will spread about how to defend against them. You pat her hand. The world bends, but doesn't break. Count Adalbert arrives 3 days later with a retinue of armed men. He's younger than you expected, perhaps 30, with the confident bearing of someone born to privilege, but the watchful eyes of a man who's seen combat. He wastes no time assessing your village's resources and position. His manner is brusque, but not cruel. This is business, the business of survival. Your location is good, he tells the village leaders gathered in your small church. Elevated, good visibility, defensible with proper works. He points to a map spread on the altar. I'm establishing a chain of signal fires on these hills. If Vikings are spotted, we can spread warning faster than they can move. It's a sensible plan. You think back to your desperate warning mission during the Avar raid. How many lives might have been saved with a better system of communication? Each village will contribute based on size and wealth, the Count continues. Men for a fighting force, materials for fortifications, food stores for reserves. A murmur runs through the gathering. These are substantial demands. In return, Adalbert raises his voice slightly, I offer my protection and that of my household knights. Any village under my protection that is attacked will be avenged and compensated from my own treasury. This is new. A formal exchange of obligations, not just taxes flowing upward or occasional protection flowing downward, but a specific contract, service for protection, resources for security. You're witnessing, though you don't have the words for it, the crystallization of feudal relationships that will define European society for centuries to come. Later, as Count Adalbert inspects the village's existing defences, you watch from your chair. Your grandson, a serious young man of 16, walks alongside the Count, answering questions about the village's resources. Your grandfather, you overhear Adalbert ask. He's the founder. Your grandson nods. Started with just a land grant from King Clovis's time. Built all this. The Count looks over at you with newfound interest, then approaches. You try to stand, a gesture of respect, but he waves you back to your seat. Save your strength, elder, he says, studying your face. You've built something worth defending here. My family and neighbours built it, you correct him gently. I just lived long enough to see it happen. A smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. Survival itself is an achievement in these times. He glances around at the village, the fields beyond, the small but solid stone church. Few can claim to have seen what you've seen, from the aftermath of Rome to Charlemagne's empire and beyond. You wonder what this young noble wants from you. Men of power rarely seek out old peasants for conversation without purpose. You've seen strategies against raiders, he says, confirming your suspicion. The Avars, I'm told, different from these Northmen, but perhaps there are lessons. And so you find yourself, in the twilight of your life, counselling a Count on matters of war and defence. You tell him about the Avars' tactics, their probing attacks and coordinated strikes. You explain how warning systems failed and how they might be improved. He listens intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that reveal a tactical mind. This is not some soft noble raised in luxury, but a man prepared for the harsh realities of a world where violence remains a constant. The Northmen are not just raiders, Adalbert says when you finish. Some wish to settle, to take land. His expression darkens. The kings are too busy fighting each other to see the true threat. And you ask boldly, age giving you a freedom to speak that you wouldn't have had in your younger years. I see my duty clearly, protect what's mine, expand when possible. He meets your eyes directly. The world is changing, old one. Power is moving from distant kings to those of us who actually hold territory and men. He's right, you realise. You're witnessing another shift in how the world works. As the Carolingian Empire fragments, power is becoming more local, more tied to specific territories and the men who can defend them. Counts like Adalbert, who once served as royal administrators, are becoming independent powers in their own right. Your village will contribute 20 men to the defence force, Adalbert says, returning to business, plus grain, timber and iron as assessed. In return, you'll have my protection and a place in the new defensive network. It's not a request, but neither does it feel like exploitation. It's a necessary adaptation to a dangerous world, the kind of adaptation you've seen repeatedly throughout your long life. As the Count prepares to leave, he pauses beside your chair once more. If the Northmen come, "We'll hold," he says with quiet confidence, "and when this crisis passes, those who stood firm will prosper in the new order." You watch him ride away with his men, your aging mind turning over his words. New order, that's what you've been witnessing your entire life. The slow, painful, often violent birth of a new order from the ashes of the old. From the fallen Roman Empire came the Frankish kingdoms. From the Frankish kingdoms came Charlemagne's empire. And now, as that empire fragments, something else is taking shape. A world of local lords and mutual obligations, of knights and castles and oaths of fealty. The feudal world, the truly medieval world. As the sun sets on your village, no longer just a compound, but a community with a name, a church, a place in a larger network, you feel a strange satisfaction. You've witnessed history not from the throne room or the battlefield, but from the fields and hearths, where ordinary people fight their daily battle for survival. And somehow, despite everything, survival has become something more. Your grandchildren will face dangers. The Viking threat is real, and winter hunger always looms. But they have structures to protect them that didn't exist when you were young. They have stone walls, organized defenses, mutual obligations with powerful protectors. The world is far from perfect, but it's no longer the chaotic vacuum that followed Rome's fall. Something new has been built, stone by stone, field by field, community by community, and you, now in the final season of your life, have seen it happen. Time flows like a river, carrying generations along its current. The old founder of Harold's Cross, you, in our story so far, passed peacefully in his sleep after witnessing nearly 8 decades of history. His children continued his legacy, and their children after them. The village endured Viking raids, harsh winters, and political turmoil. Some years brought prosperity, others devastation, but always the community adapted and survived. Now we leap forward like a stone skipping across water to land in a very different medieval world. The year is 1095, almost 200 years after our story began. You're no longer the original founder, but his great-great-great-grandson, a man of 35 named Thomas. You wake in a sturdy, timber-framed house in what is now a proper town, not just a village. Harold's Cross has grown considerably, sitting at the intersection of 2 important trade routes. Your bed is a distinct improvement over what your ancestor slept on, a proper wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with clean straw and wool covered with linen sheets. The room is still cold. Heating remains a luxury, but glass windows, a recent addition you're quite proud of, keep out the worst of the drafts. Only the wealthiest homes have such windows, and yours is among them. This is your first hint that something fundamental has changed in Europe. Where once survival itself was the daily challenge, now human ingenuity has created new comforts, new possibilities. The high Middle Ages have arrived. You stretch and rise, pulling on woolen hose and a linen undertunic, before adding a finely woven wool overtunic dyed a deep blue, another luxury that signals your status. As a prosperous merchant and town alderman, your clothing reflects your position in society. Your family has risen considerably from its humble beginnings. The small landholding granted to your ancestor has expanded into extensive fields worked by tenant farmers. The strategic location on the old Roman road has made Harold's Cross a natural market town. Your grandfather was the first in the family to move beyond farming into trade, and you've expanded that business significantly. Downstairs, your household is already active. Your wife Margaret directs 2 servants in preparing the morning meal while simultaneously supervising your youngest children. Your older sons are already at the warehouse near the town gates checking yesterday's deliveries. The Bishop's Envoy arrives today, Margaret reminds you as you break your fast with fresh bread, cheese and ale, a breakfast that would have seemed luxurious to your ancestors, but is standard for a family of your standing. I haven't forgotten, you assure her, though in truth the matter had slipped your mind among your many concerns. I'll make sure everything is prepared. This is no ordinary visit. The Bishop's Envoy brings word from the Pope himself, a call that has apparently gone out across Christendom. No one knows exactly what this call entails, but rumours have been circulating for weeks. After breakfast, you make your way through the streets of Harold's Cross. The town would be unrecognisable to its founder, where once stood a handful of wooden buildings. Now nearly 2,000 people live and work in hundreds of structures ranging from humble cottages to substantial stone buildings. The small wooden church has been replaced by a proper stone structure with a bell tower. A market square bustles with activity most days. There's even a small castle on the hill overlooking the town, home to the local lord who holds the territory for the Duke. This transformation isn't unique to Harold's Cross. Across Europe, the population has exploded over the past 2 centuries. Better farming techniques, the heavy plough, the horse collar, 3-field crop rotation have dramatically increased food production. More food means more people, and more people means more trade, more crafts, more towns. You pass the workshop of Simon the glassmaker, the man who created your precious windows. Inside, his apprentices carefully cut and leaded panes for a commission from a wealthy monastery. Next door, a silversmith delicately hammers intricate patterns into a chalice. Across the street, the workshop of a master woodcarver produces altarpieces and furniture for clients as far as 50 miles away. This specialization of labor would have been impossible in the subsistence economy of your ancestors' time. Now the population has grown enough and transportation reliable enough that artisans can focus on specific crafts, creating items of beauty and utility that far exceed what previous generations could produce. At the town gate, you find your sons, Martin and John, overseeing the unloading of a shipment of wool from the north. Everything in order, you ask, inspecting the tightly packed bales. Quality's good, Martin, your eldest at 17, confirms, though Walter tried to claim it was damp and wanted a lower price. You nod approvingly at how he handled the situation. Your business involves buying raw materials from surrounding regions, having them processed by local craftspeople, and selling the finished goods to distant markets. It's a complex operation that requires literacy, numeracy, and a keen sense for both quality and human nature. These skills themselves reflect another change from your ancestors' time. Literacy is no longer the exclusive domain of clergy. As a merchant, you were taught to read, write, and calculate by the town priest, and you've ensured your sons received the same education. Knowledge has begun to spread beyond monastery walls. After checking the accounts with your sons, you make your way to the town hall, a 2-story stone building facing the market square. Inside, the other town aldermen are already gathering. Like you, they represent the emerging urban elite, merchants, master craftsmen, and prosperous landowners who manage the town's affairs alongside the Lord's appointed officials. This shared governance is yet another innovation of the High Middle Ages. Towns have begun to secure charters from their lords or kings, granting them certain rights and privileges in exchange for taxes. The growing wealth of urban centres makes them too valuable to be ruled arbitrarily. Even kings must now negotiate with the merchant class. They say the Pope has called for a great army, says Gilbert the clothier as you take your seat at the oak table, an army to march east. To fight the Turks? Asks another alderman. That's the rumour in Rhymes? We'll know soon enough, you reply, though privately you've heard the same rumours. The Seljuk Turks have been expanding their territory, threatening the Byzantine Empire and making pilgrimage to Jerusalem increasingly dangerous. For years, reports have trickled back of Christians harassed or killed on the holy roads. The meeting proceeds with routine town business, disputes to settle, taxes to assess, repairs to authorise. Harold's Cross has grown prosperous enough to maintain its own walls, bridges and public buildings. The complexity of urban administration would have been unimaginable to your ancestor, concerned primarily with survival against raiders and harsh weather. By midday, a commotion outside interrupts your deliberations. The bishop's envoy has arrived. You and the other aldermen file out to the market square, where a crowd has already gathered. The envoy, a gaunt, hard-faced man in ecclesiastical robes, sits astride a fine horse, flanked by several armed retainers. The town's priest hurries to welcome him, bowing deeply. Without dismounting, the envoy unrolls a parchment sealed with red wax and begins to read in a ringing voice. By the authority of His Holiness Pope Urban II, Christ's representative on earth, I bring word of a holy enterprise. His voice carries across the hushed square. In the east, our Christian brothers suffer under the yoke of the infidel. The holy places where our Lord walked are defiled by unbelievers. The roads to Jerusalem run with Christian blood. The crowd murmurs. These stories aren't new, but never before have they been delivered with such official weight. His Holiness calls upon all Christian men to take up the cross and journey to the Holy Land to liberate Jerusalem from the hands of the infidel. The envoy's voice rises. Those who undertake this sacred journey will receive complete remission of sins. Those who die in this holy cause shall be granted immediate entry to paradise. The crowd erupts in exclamations and questions. Remission of sins is no small offer in a world where the afterlife looms as a constant concern. For many, the fear of purgatory, potentially centuries of suffering to purge sins before entering heaven, is very real. When spring comes, the envoy continues, armies will gather. Great lords have already sworn to lead them. Count Raymond of Toulouse, Duke Godfrey of Bouillon, Prince Bohemond of Taranto. Names known even in your provincial town. This is clearly no minor expedition. Those who cannot fight may contribute in other ways, the envoy concludes. Provisions, transportation, funds for weapons and supplies, all who aid this holy cause will share in its spiritual benefits. As the envoy is escorted to the Lord's castle for more private discussions, the town square remains abuzz with excited talk. You make your way back to the town hall with the other aldermen, all deep in conversation about what this means. "Will you go?" asks Gilbert, once you're seated again. You consider the question seriously. You're still young enough, fit enough from overseeing your business interests. The spiritual benefits are tempting. What Christian wouldn't want guaranteed remission of sins? And there would be profit opportunities as well. Vast armies need vast supplies. But you also think of your wife, your children, your responsibilities here. The journey to Jerusalem is thousands of miles across hostile territory. Many who leave will never return. My oldest son might go, you say finally. He's been restless, eager to see more of the world than our town. Others nod in understanding. Across Europe, similar conversations are happening. In castle halls, village squares, monastery cloisters, the Pope's call will mobilize tens of thousands, from humble peasants to crowned kings. You're witnessing the birth of the Crusades, a movement that will reshape relations between Europe and the East for centuries to come. That evening, as predicted, your son Martin approaches you as you sit by the fire reviewing business accounts. "Father," he begins with unusual formality, "I wish to take the cross. Though you expected this, the reality still strikes you with force. Your firstborn, your heir, volunteering for a dangerous journey to a distant land. It's not a tourney or a festival," you caution him. "Men will die from battle, disease, starvation." "I understand," he insists, "but when will such a chance come again? To see the world, to fight for a holy cause, to have all sins forgiven?" His eyes shine with youthful idealism. "And think of the opportunities for our business, new contacts in distant lands, new goods to trade." Always practical, even in his idealism. He is your son, after all. After much discussion with your wife, tears and arguments and eventual reluctant acceptance, you agree to Martin's request, with conditions. He won't go alone, but with a company of men from Harold's Cross, properly equipped at your expense, and he'll take with him trade goods and letters of credit, making the journey not just a spiritual pilgrimage, but a commercial expedition as well. The preparations over the winter months give you a different perspective on this crusading phenomenon. As a merchant, you see beyond the religious fervour to the massive logistical operation taking shape. Thousands of men need weapons, armour, horses, food, ships. Markets across Europe surge with activity. Prices for certain goods, metals, leather, preserved foods skyrocket. You're not the only one to see opportunity in crisis. Venetian and Genoese merchants negotiate contracts to transport crusaders by sea at considerable profit. Money changers and early bankers develop new instruments to allow funds to be accessed in distant lands. Italian textile merchants eye potential new sources of silk and cotton in eastern markets. What began as a religious calling is already becoming enmeshed with commercial expansion. The Crusades will open trade routes, introduce new products to European markets, and accelerate the growth of banking and credit systems. Without realizing it, Europe is developing commercial tools that will ultimately transform its economy. By early spring, Martin's company is ready. 30 men from Harold's Cross and surrounding villages, equipped with the best armour and weapons your money can buy. The town gathers to see them off, the priest blessing their journey as each man sews a cloth cross to his cloak, marking him as a crusader. You embrace your son, fighting unexpected emotion. "Remember why you're going," you tell him quietly. "Yes, for God and the holy places, but also to learn, to grow our connections, to bring knowledge back." "I will, Father," he promises. "I'll make you proud." As you watch him ride away with his companions, you reflect on how different his world is from that of your ancestor who founded this settlement. That man struggled daily for basic survival in a fragmented, chaotic post-Roman world. Your son rides confidently toward Jerusalem, part of a massive, coordinated European enterprise spanning thousands of miles. The months after Martin's departure bring dramatic changes to Harold's Cross. With so many men gone to the crusade, labour becomes scarce and wages rise. Women take on roles previously closed to them, managing businesses and workshops while husbands, fathers and sons are away. Your wife Margaret, always involved in your business, now handles much of the day-to-day operations, showing a keen mind for commerce that surprises even you. News from the east arrives sporadically, carried by returning pilgrims or merchant caravans. The stories are a mix of triumph and horror, massive armies on the march, battles won and lost, starvation, disease, and occasional atrocities committed by crusaders against local populations, both Muslim and Jewish. One warm summer evening, as you sit in your garden reviewing correspondence, a servant announces an unexpected visitor, a weather-beaten man in dusty travelling clothes who refuses to give his name. When the stranger is shown in, you're shocked to recognise Edric, one of the men who left with Martin. "My son?" you ask immediately, rising to your feet. "Alive and well when I left him, master," Edric reassures you quickly. "He sent me back with news and these." He opens his travel-worn pack and carefully removes several packages, letters sealed with wax, small parcels wrapped in oilcloth, and a slim leather-bound book. The letters contain Martin's detailed accounts of the journey, the crossing to Constantinople, the overwhelming grandeur of that ancient city, the difficult march through Anatolia, battles against Turkish forces, the siege of Nicaea. His descriptions are vivid, mixing wide-eyed wonder at new sights with shrewd observations about potential trade opportunities. But it's the parcels that truly capture your attention. Each contains samples of goods rarely or never seen in Harold's Cross. Spices like cumin, cinnamon and nutmeg, fine cotton cloth lighter than any wool or linen, intricate metalwork using techniques unknown to your local craftsman, tiny glass vials of exotic scents. "He trades as he travels," Edric explains with a smile. "Says he's already doubled the value of the goods he brought from home." The book proves most valuable of all, a merchant's guidebook written in Arabic but with Latin annotations added by a monk travelling with the Crusaders. It contains information about markets, prices, available goods and trading customs throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. This small leather volume represents something profound, knowledge flowing back to Europe, practical information that will transform commerce. It's just one tiny example of the broader exchange happening as Europeans venture east in unprecedented numbers. That night, as you share Martin's letters with Margaret and your other children, you realise you're witnessing another pivotal moment in European history. The Crusades, whatever their religious justification, are reconnecting Western Europe with the wider world after centuries of relative isolation. Through your merchant's eyes, you see beyond the immediate military campaign to its long-term consequences. New trade routes, new products, new knowledge, new connections between cultures. Europe is reaching outward, becoming less insular, more engaged with distant lands. Your ancestor witnessed the painful birth of medieval civilization from the ashes of Rome. Now you're witnessing that civilization begin to mature and expand its horizons. What was once a defensive, inward-looking culture focused on basic survival has become confident enough to project its power and ambitions thousands of miles from home. As you fall asleep that night, surrounded by the exotic scents and goods from your son's parcels, you wonder what world your grandchildren will inherit. The pace of change seems to be accelerating. New towns are being charted each year, trade routes reach farther, knowledge spreads faster. The Dark Ages are truly over. A new European civilization has emerged from the crucible of survival, still imperfect, still violent, still struggling with old challenges, but vibrant, growing, and increasingly connected to a wider world. And somewhere on the dusty roads to Jerusalem, your son is part of making that history. Another leap forward, and the medieval world transforms once again. It's now 1348, another 2.5 centuries since we left Thomas anxiously awaiting news from his Crusader son. Harold's Cross has grown into a prosperous town of nearly 5,000 souls, with stone walls, multiple churches, a small university, and a thriving market that draws merchants from hundreds of miles around. You're Catherine, the daughter of a wealthy merchant family directly descended from the town's founder. You wake in a canopied bed with linen sheets and wool blankets, a luxury unimaginable to your distant ancestor who slept on straw. Your bedroom occupies the 3rd floor of a substantial stone townhouse near the market square. Tapestries line the walls, both for decoration and to keep out drafts, and a small glass window lets in the pale light of dawn. At 24, you're unusual for your time, unmarried, educated, and helping to run your family's trading company. Your father, progressive in his thinking, ensured you learn to read and write in both the local vernacular and Latin, as well as the mathematics needed for commerce. When plague took your two brothers 3 years ago, you stepped into their role rather than seeing the business pass to distant male cousins. This morning, as you dress in a fine wool gown with silk trim, another sign of how far European trade networks have expanded, your mind is preoccupied with troubling rumours. For months, disturbing reports have been arriving from the south. A terrible sickness, deadlier than any before, sweeping through cities and countryside alike. They call it the Great Mortality, or more simply, the Plague. "It's reached Lyon," your father announced grimly at dinner last night after meeting with merchants newly arrived from the south. "Half the city dead, they say, commerce at a standstill. Lyon is less than 200 miles away, too close for comfort." You make your way downstairs, where servants have prepared a breakfast far more elaborate than what your ancestors would have known. Fresh bread, preserved fruits, cheese, cold meats, and wine watered with honey. The kitchen at the back of your house features a proper chimney and oven. Innovations that have transformed cooking and made houses safer from fire. Your father sits at the head of the table, already reviewing account books. At 52, his hair has gone completely grey, but his mind remains sharp. The family business, importing luxury goods from Italy and the East and exporting fine wool cloth produced in workshops you own, has thrived under his management. "The council is meeting this morning," he tells you without looking up. "The plague will be the only topic, I expect." "Will they close the gates to travellers?" you ask, taking your seat. Some want to, others say it would ruin the spring fair and doom many to poverty. He sighs, finally setting down his quill. Either choice brings suffering. This is the brutal calculus of medieval life in crisis, weighing economic survival against physical survival. Your town depends on trade. Isolating it could prevent disease, but would strangle its economic lifeline. After breakfast, you walk with your father through streets that would astonish your ancestors. What began as a tiny settlement of wooden huts along an old Roman road has become a proper urban centre with paved main streets, multi-storey stone buildings, specialised districts for different crafts, and public infrastructure like fountains and bridges. You pass the cloth hall where your business conducts much of its trade, a large stone building with huge windows and an open floor where merchants display their wares. Next door stands a goldsmith's hall, and beyond that, workshops for everything from book production to fine leather goods. The sound of hammers, looms, and commerce fills the air. The town hall, where the council meets, is the grandest secular building in Harold's Cross. 3 stories of dressed stone with large windows, slate roof, and a tower for the town records. Inside, representatives of the major guilds, wealthy merchants, and minor nobility with interest in the town are already gathering. As your father takes his seat, he's been a council member for 20 years. You find a place along the wall with other observers. Though women can't vote in council proceedings, no one objects to your presence as your father's acknowledged deputy in business matters. The debate is intense and immediate. No preliminaries, no gradual warming to the topic. Everyone understands the stakes. Venice lost 3/5 of its population, announces a spice merchant with connections to Italian trading houses. Florence, nearly the same. This is no ordinary sickness. All the more reason to protect ourselves, argues the head of the Weavers' Guild. Close the gates now, before it reaches us. No visitors, no spring fair. And watch our people starve instead of sicken, counters another merchant. The fair provides half our annual income. Without it, many won't survive the year. The town physician, a university-trained man who represents the latest in medical thinking, rises to speak. The disease spreads through miasma, poisoned air that corrupts the humours. He speaks with complete confidence in a theory that later centuries will disprove. We should burn herbs, and purifying substances throughout the town require strict cleaning of streets and, yes, limit entry to those from affected regions. Back and forth the arguments go, revealing the competing interests and genuine fears of a community facing an existential threat. You listen carefully, noting how different this is from the crises your ancestors faced. They struggled against raiders, hunger, and political chaos, with few resources beyond their immediate community. Your town faces a microscopic enemy with the accumulated knowledge, wealth, and institutions built over centuries of medieval development. Finally, a compromise emerges. The gates will remain open, but travellers will be inspected for signs of illness. The spring fair will proceed, but with additional cleanliness measures. Prayers and processions will be organised to seek divine protection. Houses with sick occupants will be marked and isolated. It's a reasonable middle path that reflects both medieval understanding of disease and the economic realities of urban life, and it will prove completely ineffective against what's coming. 2 weeks later, the first cases appear in Harold's Cross. A merchant who seemed healthy when he passed through the gates falls ill the next day, developing painful swellings, buboes, in his groin and armpits, followed by black spots on his skin. He dies within 3 days. His host family sickens next, then their neighbours. With terrifying speed, the disease spreads through the town. The measures enacted by the council, the cleaning, the isolation, the herbs burned in the streets, do nothing to slow it. This is the Black Death, caused by a bacterium carried by fleas on rats, a mechanism completely unknown to medieval medicine. You watch with growing horror as familiar faces disappear from the streets. The baker who always saved the best loaf for your household, the old woman who sells flowers in the market square, the apprentice from the cloth hall who flirted innocently with you last Easter. Then your father falls ill. It begins with a fever and crushing fatigue. By evening, the characteristic buboes appear, swollen, painful lymph nodes that confirm your worst fears. You refuse to leave his side, despite the danger of contagion. You must go, he insists weakly, his face already showing the dark spots that give the disease its name. Take what coin and valuables you can carry. Leave the town while the gates are still open. But you can't abandon him or the business that has been your family's legacy for generations. Instead, you try everything suggested by physicians and folk healers alike. Poultices of herbs, bleeding to balance the humours, prayers to every saint associated with healing. Nothing works. Within 4 days, your father is gone, along with a third of your household staff. Numb with grief but clear-eyed about what must be done, you take full control of the family business in a world suddenly transformed. The council has stopped meeting. Too many members are dead or fled. The town's elaborate social hierarchies have collapsed under the weight of mass mortality. Survivors focus only on immediate needs. Over the next 3 months, the Black Death claims roughly 40% of Harold's Cross. Similar death rates are reported from every region the plague touches, an almost inconceivable demographic catastrophe. Entire families disappear, houses stand empty, fields go unharvested. But by autumn, the worst has passed. The plague burns through the population and then, mysteriously to medieval observers, begins to recede. Survivors cautiously resume normal activities. Markets reopen. The dead are buried, their possessions inherited or redistributed. And then something unexpected happens. For the survivors, economic conditions actually improve. With so many dead, labour becomes scarce and valuable. Workers can demand higher wages and better treatment. Tenant farmers find landlords competing for their services rather than dictating terms. Surviving craftspeople charge more for their products, which are now rarer. You experience this directly as you rebuild your family's business. The weavers who produce cloth for your company demand twice their previous wages. The servants in your household negotiate better food and time off. Even the lowliest labourers who load your goods onto carts expect substantially more for their efforts. At first, the elites, nobles, wealthy merchants, large landowners try to resist these changes. Laws are passed fixing wages at pre-plague levels. Penalties are enacted for workers who demand more. But with so many dead, these measures prove impossible to enforce. There simply aren't enough workers to coerce. 6 shillings a week and a new tunic at Christmas, demands Anne, a weaver's widow who now runs her husband's loom. That's my price. Before the plague, she would have received 2 shillings and been grateful, but Anne knows her leverage in this new world. The Duke's Reeve is offering 5 shillings, you counter, engaging in the kind of negotiation that would have been unthinkable with lower-class workers before the plague. Anne shrugs. Then I'll work for the Duke. My cloth is the finest in 3 counties, as you well know. She's right, and you can afford her price with the higher rates you're now charging for finished cloth. 6 shillings, you agree, but the tunic comes at Easter, not Christmas. This scene plays out across Europe in the years following the Black Death. The rigid social hierarchies and economic structures of the High Middle Ages begin to crack under the pressure of demographic change. Peasants and urban workers gain bargaining power. Traditional authorities struggle to maintain control. By 1352, 4 years after the plague first struck, Harold's Cross has reached a new equilibrium. The population is smaller, but per capita wealth has increased. Your business has contracted in volume but grown in profitability. You've married a cloth merchant from a neighbouring town, combining your businesses and creating one of the region's most powerful commercial enterprises. One crisp autumn morning, as you review accounts in your counting house, a visitor is announced. Master Nicholas, one of the instructors from the town's small university. You know him slightly. He teaches mathematics and natural philosophy to the sons of wealthy merchants and lesser nobility. Mistress Catherine, he greets you with a small bow. I've come with a proposition. Intrigued, you invite him to sit. Nicholas is known as a forward-thinking man, interested in practical applications of knowledge rather than just theoretical discussions. I've designed an improvement to the vertical loom, he explains, unrolling a parchment with detailed drawings. With this modification, a weaver can produce twice the cloth in the same time. You study the design with interest. Since the plague, mechanical innovations have become increasingly valuable as a way to compensate for lost labour. Watermills and windmills have been adapted for new purposes. Labour-saving devices are in high demand. If this works as you claim, it would be worth a considerable investment, you acknowledge. But why come to me? The Weavers' Guild would be the natural partner. Nicholas smiles ruefully. The guild masters reject it. They fear it would reduce the value of their skills or require fewer weavers. His experience reflects a growing tension in late medieval society. Traditional guilds, which helped establish quality standards and training systems during the High Middle Ages, are becoming increasingly conservative, resistant to innovations that might disrupt their control over crafts. I need a patron who sees the future, not just the past, Nicholas continues. Someone who understands that prosperity comes from innovation, not just tradition. You find yourself nodding. Since taking full control of your business, you've been pushing boundaries, employing women as account keepers, establishing direct trading relationships with Italian merchants rather than working through traditional intermediaries, experimenting with new dyeing techniques from the East. If your design works, you say, we'll split the profits from licensing it to non-guild workshops in other towns. This partnership between practical academic knowledge and commercial enterprise represents another shift in late medieval society. Universities, initially focused on theology and classical learning, are increasingly engaging with practical matters. Scholars like Nicholas are looking beyond ancient texts to develop new knowledge. Over the next 5 years, your business thrives as Nicholas's improved loom design proves its worth. You establish workshops in several towns, carefully navigating guild restrictions where they exist or operating in newer communities where guilds hold less power. But technological innovation is just one of the changes reshaping medieval Europe in the aftermath of the Black Death. Political structures are evolving too, as you discover when a royal official arrives in Harold's Cross in 1357. Sir William, a knight in service to the king, brings both a proclamation and a request. The proclamation requires all merchants to use standardized weights and measures established by royal authority. The request is for a substantial voluntary contribution to fund the king's ongoing war efforts against a neighboring realm. The king seeks to ensure fair commerce throughout his domains, Sir William explains smoothly to the hastily reassembled town council, and to protect his loyal subjects from foreign threats. What goes unsaid but is understood by everyone in the room is that this represents another step in the centralization of royal power. For centuries, weights and measures varied from town to town, regulated by local authorities. Now the crown seeks to standardize them. A seemingly benign administrative change that actually represents a significant transfer of control from local to royal government. After the meeting, you host Sir William at your home over an elaborate meal that showcases your wealth. Imported spices, fine wines, decorative sugar sculptures. You probe for information about the king's broader intentions. These wars are costly, you observe. How long does His Majesty expect merchants to fund them? Sir William sips his wine before answering carefully. The king believes a strong central authority benefits all his subjects. Local defence, like your town walls, served their purpose in more chaotic times, but now a standing royal army can provide more consistent protection. At a consistent cost, I imagine, you reply dryly. He inclines his head in acknowledgement. The king offers something in return: uniform laws, standardized currency, protection of trade routes, representation of merchant interests in matters of state. What Sir William describes, though neither of you would use these terms, is the early stage of the modern nation-state, emerging from the decentralized feudal structures of the earlier medieval period. Kings are consolidating power, creating more unified territories with common laws, currencies, and administrative systems. This political evolution is made possible partly by the Black Death's aftermath. The old feudal order, based on rigid obligations between lords and peasants tied to land, has been weakened by demographic collapse. Kings can appeal directly to towns and their wealthy merchants for financial support, bypassing traditional noble intermediaries. As Harold's Cross enters the 1360s, you witness the culmination of many trends that have been building throughout the medieval period. The town's new cathedral nears completion, its soaring Gothic arches and enormous stained glass windows demonstrating both technical mastery and artistic confidence unimaginable in earlier centuries. Your business corresponds regularly with partners in Venice, Bruges, and London, using sophisticated financial instruments like bills of exchange that allow money to move across Europe without physical coins changing hands. Reports arrive of remarkable developments elsewhere, mechanical clocks appearing in town squares, printing methods using movable type being developed in German lands, universities establishing new faculties dedicated to medicine and law. One evening, as you sit in your garden watching your grandchildren play, you reflect on the long arc of history your family has witnessed. Your distant ancestor struggled for basic survival in the chaotic aftermath of Rome's collapse. Generations later, your family helped build a thriving community within the new feudal order. Your crusader forebears connected Europe to wider trade networks and knowledge systems. Your parents lived through the apocalyptic shock of the Black Death. And now your grandchildren will inherit a world transforming yet again, more urban, more commercial, more technological, with political power consolidating into larger units. The foundations of the modern world are being laid even as medieval institutions and mindsets persist. Medieval Europe, you realize, was never static. It was always evolving, adapting, building new systems as old ones failed, preserving useful knowledge while generating fresh insights. From the desperate survival strategies of the early Middle Ages to the confident global ambitions of the late medieval period, Europe underwent a millennium of continuous change. As twilight deepens in your garden, you draw your woolen cloak, woven on Nicholas's improved loom, more tightly around your shoulders. The medieval world still has decades of life ahead of it. Columbus won't sail for another century. The Renaissance is only beginning to flower in Italian cities. The Protestant Reformation remains in the future. But the foundations have been laid. The 1,000-year journey from the fall of Rome through the formation of a new civilization is nearly complete. Europe has forged a distinct identity, built institutions that will endure for centuries, and developed tools, intellectual, technological, and administrative, that will soon allow it to project power globally. Your grandchildren, playing innocently among the herb beds, will witness the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era. They don't know it yet, but they stand at one of history's great turning points. As you watch them in the fading light, your mind drifts to your own comfortable bed waiting upstairs, so different from the straw pallets of your ancestors, yet connected to them through the unbroken chain of survival, adaptation, and progress that defined medieval life. The thought is strangely comforting as you feel yourself growing drowsy, from chaos to order, from scarcity to prosperity, from isolation to connection. The medieval journey continues, carrying you gently toward dreams of a future your ancestors could hardly have imagined. And as you drift off to sleep in your own comfortable bed, so different from the medieval world we've explored together, perhaps you too can appreciate how that 1,000-year journey helped shape the world we inhabit today.